for coming down today, and sorry about the slight delay. But we have people kind of still trickling in, and so glad that you guys are here today. And we are very happy to welcome really someone who is the man of the hour, because he has taken precious vacation, family time with his, his vacation time with his family to be here, because he just knows so much about this technology and has put it into practice. And so we're very, very lucky to have Rob Bolton here with us today. He's the Director of Water and Sewer in Vero Beach, Florida, which, similarly is just surrounded by water. And they were having, as you'll hear him talk about today, similar issues with nutrient loading. And there they get toxic algal blooms, which I'll talk about, where the problem is just much more obvious. Here, it's more under the water, and we get the nutrient loading that creates algal overgrowth on the reefs, but equally as serious, because our reefs are being smothered to death. And these nutrients, along with ag runoff and other forms of runoff, are really, doing serious damage to our reefs. Also want to acknowledge Mike Saunders with Arinco, who flew out here for this. He's worked with Rob for years and years, and Arinco developed technology. And even before we met these guys, when we saw this technology with Hawaii's landscape, with the hard lava services and the cost of excavation, we were like, this is something that we have to explore, because we believe it'll reduce the cost of cesspool conversions dramatically. So this is going to be more informal Pauhana style. Rob is going to be sitting there. We're going to go through the slides, and then we're going to open up for Q&A. And this really is about networking. So please do you got tons of food and drinks. Make sure you get food and drink. It's a relaxed atmosphere. Any questions before we begin? All right. If you need to use the bathroom, there's a key hanging on the front desk, and the bathroom's right in the hall. So yeah, let's work out any sound issues that we have. And you need to one of them mute. All right. And we do have a couple, we weren't planning on it, but some of our folks may join us online. But if you can help me give a round of applause for Rob Bolton.
Thank you. And thank you, Stuart, for having me here today. And as we kind of go through this, there are things in Vero Beach that are under the water that are affected too. Instead of coral reefs, we have seagrass. So although we have the algal blooms, what's happening there is the seagrass is dying from the algal blooms because you don't get any sunlight through to it, which then has an effect on the entire estuary that we have. So with that, I'll get started. But I'm here today. I'll give a little introduction as to the history where I grew up. I grew up in a family where my dad owned a cesspool company. So, and then it became a septic system company. And then eventually I ended up going to college, moving to Florida, met my wife of 35 years, and eventually moved to Melbourne, Florida, worked for the city of Palm Bay for 10 years, got my professional engineering license. I'm licensed in the state of Florida as a professional engineer. And then around the millennium change, or the year 2000, I switched and went down to Vero Beach, where I've been now for the last 26 years, 19 of which have been as the director of both water, wastewater, and reef. So Florida's on the East Coast, or I'm sorry, Vero Beach is on the East Coast of Florida. It's part of the Basin Management Action Plan of the Indian River Lagoon. The Indian River Lagoon is a national estuary. It's about 156 miles long. It has 6 counties that it serves, and Vero Beach is probably right about dead center. So a lot of the other counties would argue as, you know, water flows downhill, that upstream you're causing the problem. Vero Beach, we are the top of the hill. So everything that we do affects our community, and it affects the communities to both the north and the south. We have a population of 17,000. Medium household income is about 70,000. City is mostly gravity sewer with a centralized treatment plant. We have established vegetation, and we're considered Tree City USA. We have a lot of older live oak trees, especially on the barrier island, that have been protected, well, for over 50 years. And so, you know, it was a big topic of discussion was when septic tanks had to be replaced, gravity sewer became target number one, that the individuals didn't want it because they were afraid of major construction, damaging roots of the oak trees and killing off oak trees. So what's the problem? Well, as you can see, we have the full rainbow effect. That's green. You see some red, see some brown, you see some canals, and then what you end up with is advisory signs saying don't swim, don't fish, don't go in the water, don't go boating. So this is actually further south in Martin County, but up and down the lagoon, there's been problems for the last, well, 10 to 15 years. And then finally, about 10 years ago, we started doing something. Other cities started doing something. And then 2 years ago, the state finally mandated that in the Indian River Lagoon Basin, anybody that has a septic system has to connect to sewer by July 1st, 2030, or put in a nutrient reducing septic system. So completely replace your septic system with something that is removes at least 50 to 65% nitrogen. So there's 3,000 homes in our service territory. So the city of Vero Beach is part of Indian River County. So where here you have a county for each one of the islands. We have, I think, 64 counties in the state of Florida, all of which has quite a few municipalities within those counties. And a lot of the times the cities themselves started off providing water service and then moved into wastewater service. During the Clean Water Act, the counties were really, you know, forced to provide 201 plans, was what we did back in the 70s, with which discussed, you know, EPA grants and how wastewater was going to be introduced into different counties, as most everything was on cesspool or septic tanks at that time. But in our county, there's roughly 30,000 septic systems. We have 3,000 that we serve. So both the city, inside the city limits was 1,500, outside the city limits, but in our water service territory was another 1,500 units. Many of the systems that we had were old. They were failing. They're on small parcels, quarter acre. Did you have a question?
No.
Okay. On quarter acre parcels, half of them are on the barrier island, and then half were on the mainland. And they were very close to canal systems, similar to here, where you've rerouted to take care of drainage and flooding. Same in Florida, especially during the early 1900s, Florida was a swamp. So they turned around and started large drainage districts to then drain the swamp for agriculture. And then with the invention of air conditioning and mosquito control, Florida became a target of population in the 1950s and has continued to grow all the way to this day. You know, we started experiencing algal blooms. We have nutrient contributions into the Indian River Lagoon from excess nitrogen and phosphorus. It was tied to deaths of manatees both 10 years ago and recently. We had some major starvation over the last 2 or 3 years because of loss of seagrass beds. especially in the north end of the lagoon. And we had 2 or 3 years ago, we had the largest death of manatees we ever had on record. Algal blooms are cause fish kills, all of which is just a degradation of the lagoon that is a very large boating, fishing, recreational place that everybody goes to on the East Coast. So it was very important that we did something similar to what you're seeing underwater here, the destruction of reefs that is really going to cause a financial crisis to Hawaii if it continues, because that's what people come for. Probably more people come to surf and see the outside of the water, but really what goes on under the water is just as important. Like I said before, there's 30,000 total septic systems. We had 3. The septic systems were all broken and failing systems. Some had holes in the side, some had holes in the bottom, so they were acting like cesspools. Others, the drain field would fail. So we had a conversation the other day with Pu'uko, and the homeowners, they were trying to figure out what I kept saying about a septic system failure, and they weren't aware that, you know, a septic system, once it goes online, really starts to fail because the drain field actually at the bottom of the rock structure, before it starts into the draining down into the water table, you'll get a biofilm that'll start to form in that area, and it starts to block the drain field. So usually you'll get 20 to 30 years out of a drain the first time you put a drain field in, then they'll replace it in place, and then you're looking at 10 to 15 the next time. So the problem with septic systems is it's not the ultimate fix. It is a temporary fix. In some areas, I'm sure they're going to have to put in septic systems just because you're not close to any type of a sewer system to connect. But if you can connect to a sewer system, you're going to want to skip the conversion from cesspools to septic systems, because all it's going to do is really handle your solids loading and your fecal bacteria problems. It's not going to handle the nitrogen problems. And then you'll probably see regulations later on saying, okay, now it's time to get off the septic system. So you're better off just to jump past them and actually connect to sewer if possible. But septic systems, like I said, lack of treatment, especially with conventional septic systems that are the old, you just have a tank with a drain field. There's no aeration going on. There's no type of treatment going on. You probably only get about 20% treatment in those types of systems, depending on the water table depth below the drain field. Closer it is, less treatment. If you can go through 2 to 3 feet of soil, yes, you will get some treatment. This is my first trip to Hawaii, and I look at the lava and the structure of the ground, and it reminds me of the problems that we have in Central Florida, where the soil doesn't have clay. It has more of sand material. So once it hits the drain field, it's just going right down to the water table. There's really not much treatment whatsoever. If you have soil that has clay or loam in it, then you actually slows down the infiltration of the water, and then you start to get some treatment, because like I said, that biofilm is actually the treatment. So what's happening in that is your microorganisms and everything else are breaking down that effluent that's coming off the septic system and treating it before it gets to the water table. So here's your cesspool, your typical cesspool. I saw them as I grew up in New Jersey when I was a little kid, but I never saw any in the state of Florida. That doesn't mean they don't exist. They're probably in the older areas of Central Florida, in Orlando probably, and up in Tallahassee, but we really didn't see any over on the coast. It was banned by EPA in 2005. And like hopefully everybody knows in this room that not only is it a nitrogen problem, but it's also a fecal problem for your waterways. This is the history of our septic systems. Most of Florida is on a conventional septic system. They were banned now in 2025. So as of January 1st, 2025, no longer can conventional septic systems be installed in the state of Florida. all have to be a advanced treatment type unit. So modern sewer systems, you have gravity sewer coupled with centralized wastewater treatment, removes all the waste from the property. It reduces bacteria, reduces your viruses and your nutrients. You have at least secondary treatment in a lot of the older wastewater treatment plants. The city of Vero Beach has an old wastewater treatment plant built in 1977. We are now in the process of building a brand new advanced wastewater treatment plant that'll take our discharges to 5 for BOD, 5 for TSS, 3 for nitrogen, and 1 for phosphorus. It is now required in the state of Florida in areas that have basin management action plans where they have water issues with, say, the lagoon or some of the springs in the center of the state or some of the lagoons on the western side of the state, that all reused water now has to meet AWT standards by 2034. So what are the options for septic to sewer? You have conventional gravity sewer systems. They're the most popular to date. Brand new subdivisions, great system to put in, lowest maintenance costs, affordable at the time of construction of the subdivision, but it is the most costly to go back into that subdivision after it's been, built, that it's on cesspools or on septic tanks, and try to put a conventional gravity sewer system in. You have vacuum systems, they're gaining popularity. They're normally not installed for new subdivisions. They're being used for retrofit. Cost is about 70 to 80% of a gravity sewer system. It's less construction, but in Hawaii, I don't see it being practical. A vacuum system is like a sawtooth. So you start off and then you go deep and then you come up and you go deep, so that it creates, once you start creating that vacuum, it holds that vacuum. With your rock layers and everything else that you have here in Hawaii, it would probably run very similar pricing as you would for putting in a gravity sewer system. Grinder systems, less popular than gravity sewer systems, however, used more often than vacuum or even step systems. They're been around for a while. There's a lot of different manufacturers, a lot of different styles. You have E1, you have Flight makes their own grinder packages. Problem with the grinder is they're the highest maintenance cost. You have to build some additional larger piping, really, because you're pumping wastewater that's been processed through a food processor out into a system, and you have to maintain the pipelines. You have problems with failure of pumps. Here you have, like we have in Florida, we have sand, you have grit from lava, and you have sand on this island and coral. So imagine trying to put that down your sink and turn it on to your food grinder, and it's going to tear it up. Same is going to happen with your grinder system. The total cost for the grinder system is similar to the vacuum or gravity sewers when you factor in all of that maintenance cost over a 20 or 30 year period. And then you have step systems. Step systems have been around a long time. They really aren't used as much as the grinder systems. However, they're gaining popularity. They've existed in Florida for over 40 years. When I worked at Palm Bay in the 90s, we had about 80 or 90 of them. And they were in lower areas where we had gravity sewer, but it dropped down to the water. So they put this step system in that pumped up to the gravity sewer system. The step systems today are not what they were from what they were constructed in the 70s and 80s. Now, instead of pumping to a gravity sewer system, they're pumping right into force main networks. They're actually operating at higher pressures. They have filters on them so that you're not clogging pumps. They're probably the best option for your conversion from septic or cesspool to some type of a sanitary sewer system because of the low cost of maintenance and the ease in installing. You have a tank on the property. It's a little larger than a grinder pump system. The benefit of the larger tank is it provides you with storage. So if the power goes out, if you have a pump issue, you have at least 24 to 48 hours, depending on, you know, what your usage is, to allow for a response for whoever the maintaining agency is to come in and fix your issue. We have not had issues with Vero. We have now about 1,000 installations, and we really haven't had any issues. We haven't replaced the first pump in 10 years. So, and with the benefit of step systems, especially the Prelo system that Orenco has, is they offer you 10-year warranties on pumps. It's very hard to find that in the regular market on anything that's a grinder or anything that's a conventional lift station pump is going to offer you those types of warranties. So this was our experience with gravity sewer retrofits. In 2004, we had hurricanes. In 2005, I had about 60 homes that wanted to connect to gravity sewer. Back then, it was the cost of the easiest one was about $6,000, and the more expensive one was running $20,000 in 2005. Today, those costs are running between $60,000 and $80,000. We had one recently, just within the last month and a half. We had one of the communities that we serve was going to repave some roads, so they wanted to put gravity sewer under the roads because they're going to reconstruct them. And the cost of, the bids opened, and it was about $65,000 for the total cost. The homeowners are only going to have to pay $33,000 for the gravity sewer line, but then they still have their on-lot cost that's going to run them about $7,000. So if you have to rebuild the road, you're looking at $70,000 to $80,000 for, that's in Florida. That's not here. I mean, I can't imagine what the price would be here.
Do you want questions as we go, or?
You can, yeah.
Yeah, quick questions.
Well, I'm just wondering, what are the units here when you're saying it's 60 connections? You know, what kind of distances are the connections to the laterals, and what kind of distances are you going to run up those kind of costs?
Okay, so 60 homes. Some were just the extension of dead end manholes into a neighborhood on a street. That was about $6,000 back in 2005. The $19,000, that's this project here, where we went down. It was a one road that went down, had a cul-de-sac at the end. So we had to design it to where we put it on one lane of the going down the road.
A mile, 2 miles, half mile?
It was about 60 homes, probably.
Right, but your cost is in your excavation.
Right.
Material, I think, cost, not the number of homes. So what distances?
So take 60 times 19, so
It's a little less than half a mile.
Yeah.
For a
Yeah.
per connection.
yeah, we look at it per property. I mean, if you're gonna do an assessment and do the project, you're gonna take the total cost of the project.
Right.
Divided
I'm trying
by
to
the
get
number
from
of
an engineering
units.
Perspective, what the
About
cost. of what
2,400 feet.
Okay, thank you.
So in 2000, and that was the project that we had, that had a lift station. So there was a lift station involved in that, and probably about 25, 30 homes on each side of the street, down to a point, and that it was right on the waterway. So it was canals on either side.
I understand you have to distribute the cost amongst the homes and for assessment purposes, but it's important to know what goes into that number.
And we'll
We'll get to that.
hopefully what we want to finish so we can have like just an open discussion, free for all. Not free for all. That sounds like a rock performance or something, or a big fight. We want to have an open, free flowing discussion.
So in 2007, we had received a grant for $1.5 million, but it had strings tied to it. So it was a grant from the state of Florida. It was an earmark from one of our local politicians. And part of it was we had to go out and poll the individuals to put in a gravity sewer system. And we had to have 60% approval rating.
Mhm.
Otherwise, we didn't get any funding. So we polled the 900 residents on the barrier island that we had that were in the city limits and explained to them the cost of gravity sewer. At that point, it was about $25,000–$30,000 we were estimating per property. We had 4 public meetings in 4 community places along the barrier island, and we handed out the surveys registered with all the property owners of who lived where, and we had them vote. And only 14% of the residents supported a gravity sewer system. So we knew the gravity sewer was not going to be the solution for Vero Beach moving forward. One of the issues, again, with the gravity sewer, and this is why a lot of them were against it, is not only do you have a huge cost associated with money, you know, if money's the one driving factor, but then you have social costs involved with gravity sewer problems. You have disruption of vehicular traffic, you have road and pavement damage, you have potential damage to existing utilities because you're excavating deep. You have heavy construction and air pollution going on. You have risk of pedestrian safety. If you look at these pictures, this is what a typical residential road looks like during a retrofit onto a gravity sewer system. You have higher tendency for citizen complaints. When I started this project, everybody loved me. Half of them hated me when we were in it. You have an increased environmental impacts with runoff. You look at the excavations and trying to keep the runoff from entering into your waterways. Like I said, this was on a long peninsula type canals on either side of the property's waterfront community. You have emergency access concerns. What happens if somebody has a heart attack down the end of the street? How do you get an ambulance down to them? The garbage collection, the contractor had to take the garbage up to the top of the street for them to collect the garbage every twice a week. The mail service, they were union. You know, the Pony Express ran from the West Coast or the East Coast to the West Coast, but that local mail delivery person wouldn't drive down that road, and we had to move all the mailboxes to the top of the street for them to deliver mail. So when you're looking at a conversion of this type and a process of converting from septic to sewer, you have the total capital cost, but in that total capital cost, you have an availability cost, an on-lot cost, and then a treatment cost. The availability cost is the cost to get a line out to the properties. So in a gravity sewer system, that's the most expensive. You have to, 85 to 90% of the cost of connecting the gravity sewer is the availability cost. It is the lines that are in the road, the manholes that are in the road, the connection laterals to the property. There's no way you can fund those types of projects without going through an assessment project and bonding those types of projects. You then have the on-lot cost. The on-lot cost is the connection of the home, the abandonment of the septic system, and tying the sewer, however it's coming out of the house, to either the street in a gravity sewer system or to, again, another tank if you're doing a step system or grinder or something along those lines. And then lastly, you have the treatment cost. Wherever possible, if you can connect to existing plants that are located or existing systems that are out there, that'll be the lowest. If you're going to end up having to go into areas that have no treatment plants and construct treatment plants, that's going to definitely have an impact on the cost to all the properties. So when we evaluated what the difference between a gravity sewer and an effluent sewer, in this case STEP, how it was going to cost the city and what the upfront costs were going to be, at this time back in 2013, it was a $22.5 million project for us to run a gravity sewer system and for the homeowners to connect, both the availability costs and the on-lot costs. We already had the treatment capacity. The treatment wasn't even in our equation. On an effluent sewer, because I'm just running 2-inch lines and 4-inch lines, the cost was $885,000. The total project was going to be $11 million. And a lot of the cost is on the on-lot cost itself, the construction, the excavation of the or the step system, putting in the tank, putting in the pumping system, the electrical line to the pump chamber, and then the discharge out to the road. So all of that's captured in the on-lot cost. When we started in 2013, it was not a mandatory program. So we weren't going to force anybody to connect. We didn't have the funds available to spend $18 million and not be able to connect people back up and not force them to connect. The city council of Vero Beach turned around and funded $1 million to cover that $885,000 for running the effluent sewer lines out to the community, and that's where we began. So in the step system, what we looked at was, because it had a low capital cost, it was competitive to a septic system replacement. Prior to starting the step system, our mayor told me to go out to the community one more time. So I went back out to the community right in around 2013, and I picked one little area that had about 18 connections, that had a sewer lift station there. We figured a way that we could run. There was enough room in the right of way in the grass, so I didn't even have road construction to redo, except for underneath the roadways to connect to the homeowners' lot lines for laterals. And the cost was going to be roughly $18,000 per property. I sent out 18 letters, called for a meeting in 2 weeks. Within a week, I had 6 letters back that said no. We had the meeting, 6 individuals showed up. They had proxies of the other 6 individuals that were their neighbors, and 5 of them said no. 1 guy said yes. So while they were there, I asked them, what is it going to take for you to get off your septic system and connect to a sewer system? Their comment was, we know we have to replace our septic system, or our cesspool in your case, and we're willing to go ahead and spend the money that it would cost to connect, to replace the septic system to connect to the sewer system. And that's how I ended up starting to do the research and finding out about step systems and coming up with design, because that's the only way that I could meet their expectations for cost and for ease and not have to disrupt their neighborhoods. So what I started looking at, I surfed the web and I found Orenco step systems. I contacted Orenco and talked about their 3rd generation step systems with a local rep that was actually was up in the mountains. And at that time, I think it was Bob White, because I remembered it was the bird, and but he got me in touch with Mobile, Alabama, some other communities up in the mountains. I started having conversations with them to find out, because I was concerned about maintenance. I wanted to make sure that whatever I put in, it wasn't something that was going to be a burden to the rest of the ratepayers that were on a gravity sewer system. I discussed with other cities their staffing levels that they had with step systems. There's communities to the north, they call them PEP systems. So there's probably about 13,000 units just north of us in Palm Coast area. Ormond Beach has roughly 2,000 units, all of which what I found was their staffing levels were very, very low compared to grinders. When I talked to Hillsborough County on the West Coast that had grinder stations, they were requiring about 1 service worker for about 300 to 400 units. What I was finding from the others was it was about 1 per 1,000 to 1,300 units. And we had roughly 1 person per, we had at the time, I think we had 10,000 connections for gravity sewer, and we had 10 employees work. So it fell right in line with our staffing levels that we had for a gravity sewer system. Also, I talked with other companies as far as how long their pump systems lasted. And one of the things I found was in Yelm, Washington, They had 1,700 connections that were over 20 years old, and they only had replaced 28 pumps in that 20 years. So we started design of a non-mandatory program, as I said before, to convert septic system to sewer. We estimated the 3,000 connections would be installed at full build out. We ran 93,000 linear feet of 2-inch low pressure main. It was HDPE forest main in 2014 and 15 to the 1,500 homes within the city limits. We first started, we bought our own directional drilling machine, but what we ended up finding out was once the public knew that, every time they had a septic system failure, they were calling us, they wanted to be hooked up first. So we ended up hiring a contractor that at the time, we still owned a electric system. So we had a contractor on board and they were charging like $10 a linear foot for a 2-inch line. We were buying the pipe for $1.88 a linear foot. So for $12 a linear foot, I had them out running lines. And then we took our equipment and we just started dealing with all of the failures of the septic system so that they wouldn't have to spend money replacing it and they could hook up to the step system. Now all the lines have been installed. There was a non-mandatory program. Like I said, it changed to a mandatory program. So we are going over the next 1.5 to 2 years, we're going to run another 80,000 linear feet of line. We started in March of 2026. We let the first contract. We actually got another good price for directional drilling, and for buying pipe, it's roughly going to cost us about $20 a linear foot instead of the 12, which is still cheap compared to the cost of other projects that we were doing. One of the things we did to keep pricing down was, instead of going out and hiring a GC, we actually looked at each subdivision, did smaller designs in-house, and turned around and let those projects out so that they were underneath the requirements for bonding. And that opened up the market for us to be able to hire usually the subcontractors that were working for GC, and we weren't seeing the markups. So if we would have just went out and hired a GC instead of subcontractors, we would probably be looking at $40 to $45 a linear foot for them to administer the project and do everything. Again, we now have a deadline for all of our service territory of July 1st of 2030. So we're looking at running the additional 80,000 linear feet and be done by December of 2027, so that the homeowners have roughly 2.5 years to make the connection or install the step systems on their property. This is a Pralos tank. We first started 10 years ago. Pralos wasn't around. So we had a 2-tank system. So it was really a septic tank and then a 500-gallon pump chamber. Now, since COVID, there was the company that we dealt with, Roth Tank, stopped producing for about a 6-month period, the 500-gallon tank. So we were dead in the water. Once we went through our inventory, we couldn't hook anybody else up. Around that same time, Arenco came out with the Pralos unit. So we started shipping those over. They flew out with their crews, taught us how to assemble them. So we actually do the assembly right at our warehouse. And they're shipped about 40 units at a time, and then we put them together. The Pralos unit comes in 1,000 or a 1,500-gallon system. So the picture on the top is the Pralos unit itself, as you would see it. The bottom left is the pump. The pump is more, although it's designed for wastewater, it's more of a well pump. That's why it lasts for so long. If you look at the tube, the blue tube, that's the bio tube. You can see in the bottom, there's like a white filter. It's a cutaway, so showing you, so you can see where there's a filter. So all the wastewater is actually filtered before it goes to the pump. And therefore, anything that gets into that tank does not get into the pump and clog the pump. It's a 115-volt pump, 0.5 horsepower, pumps 10 gallons a minute. We have a modified control panel where because we are in Hurricane Alley, we actually have the ability to hook up portable generators. We can power this system with a 3,000 watt little suitcase generator. And you open up the panel and you switch from main to generator and it just pumps right down. So we explain to the homeowners, we give them a package of the do's and don'ts. You know, don't flush things down the toilet, shit go down the toilet. One thing that I found in the years of is the individuals that are on a septic system or even on a cesspool are used to doing a better job than what people that are on our gravity sewer system and they just decide to flush anything down the system, and what ends up happening is it gets to a lift station, it clogs the lift station pumps, and then I have 300 or 400 people out of wastewater service where with a step system, if they abuse the system, if they flush things down, it only backs up their house. It doesn't back up their neighbor's house or anybody else's. So with a Prelo system, you know, it's very similar to gravity sewer system. When you look at it, it's just, it doesn't have the gravity sewer lines. It doesn't have manholes. It doesn't have lift stations. You're pumping right from the house to a treatment unit itself. Primary treatment occurs in the on-lot tank. You have about 85–95% removal of fog. Tanks provide, like I said, a minimum of 24 hours emergency storage. In our case, it's power related. So when the power goes out, you're really not living anymore, you're camping. So your water usage goes from about 100 gallons per capita per day down to 40 or 50. And, you know, people don't want to take cold showers. They're going to use it to flush the commode, bird bath, that type of stuff. So you're not going to do laundry. You're really not cooking. So, like I said, the usage goes down dramatically. We're experiencing about an 8 or 9 year pump out frequency. But like I said, we've been online now for 10 years. We've had 1 or 2 pump outs, some because we're seasonal, we're at 10-year marks and we haven't pumped them out yet at all. We inspect originally we started off with a 3-year inspection. We're bumping that out to 5-year because at 3 years we weren't seeing any issues. The benefit about it, like I said before, is it keeps and the benefit about the step system over the septic system is it keeps the untreated septic tank effluent from getting into the groundwater and nearby water bodies. Here's some pictures of our crew when we first started. 2-inch diameter HDPE lines. We follow the contour of the land. No lift stations, no manholes. It is immune to I&I. We had a hurricane that came through that flooded some of the properties right along the coast. One of them was one of my city council members. She called me, said, can you go check on my step system, make sure it's okay? So we went out, we popped the top off of it, and the water level was down at the normal operating level. It didn't even flood because they're sealed so well. One of the benefits is there's no major disturbances of established vegetation. We don't alter the traffic flow with our installations.
And I for everybody, infiltration and inflow.
Sorry about that.
No, that's all right. And we have a lot of it here. It can be as high during those major rainstorms as 50%. Roger Babcock said. Higher than that.
So we had a major storm that hit us, and we were treating roughly 2.8 million, and we went to over 8.
Wow.
Now that's the inflow part. So that's everybody has, you know, clean out in their yard. They have grass, and they turn around and they cut the little 2-inch plastic top off of it. So now it just becomes a hole in an access. So it rains. We had like 8 inches of rain, and you have the inflow, the spike. Right. Then you'll have the infiltration. So the spike will go down, but then you might go from 2.7 to, like he said, 50% more. You might run at 5 or 6 MGD for 2 weeks afterwards until finally you drain the water table back down to the level of all the cracked pipes that you have out in your system, and then you're back to normal again. So,
And Rob, just to make sure we have time for Q&A and everything, we have a few slides to you. About how much time do we have?
I think a few more minutes. So,
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
so this is the installation of 2-inch mains and the lateral lines. Here is the construction of putting one of the units in. Top right is the installation of a Prelos unit. The control panels on the wall, there's 3 lights. You have a green light in the center, means the power's on. Green light on the top means the pump's running. Red light means you have a problem. If you have a problem, there's an audible alarm. Go out, you push the audible alarm, and normally we have a sticker right on there that tells you what the number to call. We have, like I said before, 1,000, or Prelos 1,000 is for 3 homes or less, at maximum 4 homes. 1,500 is for 5 homes, pushing up to about 7 or 8 homes. You go back. You look at the picture in the bottom is the biotube and everything else, and then if you look, all you see is a lid in the person's landscaping, and that's all they see in their yard. So this is what our cost is. I imagine it's gonna be higher than that here because of all your lava rock and everything else. But our equipment for a Prelos 1,000 is just under 6,000. The installation, we have licensed septic tank contractors and plumbers install the equipment on the property. The installation is roughly $7,200 for a Prelos 1,000, $7,600 for a 1,500. You have an electrical connection that you need a dedicated line from the panel to the panel that's outside the Prelos panel. You have to pump out and abandon the tank, and then there's restoration. So roughly 15,000 is the cost to 17,000 for the on-lot costs. The service line in the street, and then the availability costs, which I have the 2, which is both the tap and then the 2-inch line. And then the impact fee for the treatment costs runs about another 6,000 or so. So the total cost is 21,000 to 23,000. I imagine your gut feeling is you're probably going to be close to double of that here with everything else that you have, and that's all going to be in the construction. I don't think your equipment, your lines, or all the other stuff, all the mechanics are going to be probably a little higher because you're on an island. But really, it's going to be that construction cost that you're going to have to deal with. From a maintenance standpoint, very easy. Just have to clean the filter every 3 to 5 years. Do some inspection, exercise your valves out in the field for isolation valves. If you have air release valves, make sure they're not clogged. From the on-lot, we go out and we'll turn around and just hose off the filters, inspect the pump, inspect the electrical panel, and then we'll inspect how much sludge is in the tank itself and determine when it needs to be pumped out. To date, we have 9 basins totaling 1,500 have been, the lines have been installed. 700, this is old, but 781 completed installations as of March earlier this year. We have 4 basins left, and we will go ahead and reach out to those communities and have everything installed and available to them by the end of 2027. The city council itself picked 2028 for our mandatory deadline, so it gave us 2 years prior to the state deadline. So for those individuals that didn't, just decided to balk and not connect, then we can turn them over to code enforcement to force them to connect. For those that can't afford it, they're just going to tell us when they show up at code enforcement, we can't afford it. We're not going to do anything, take my house. We'll find out ways of funding of SHIP and with veterans groups. And we actually have an activist community that's helped already and have converted 70 of those homes over through donations and qualifying through the Economic Opportunity Council. Questions?
All right, thank you, Rob. As you can see, Jacob's going to show a few slides talking about the RME, responsible management entity model that we're introducing to Hawaii based on an EPA grant that we got. And while he's setting those up, some quick questions, because we're going to combine questions for both, but let's get some quick questions here as well. Yeah.
How far in length is it from these homes that you converted to the wastewater treatment plant?
As far as probably 12 miles. I mean, a step system is really good for really far away distances because you can actually pump the effluent without, you can put some inline boosters or anything, but especially remote areas like in Florida, there's lakes. So you could have a community around a lake, but then to get to that lake, you may have to drive 5 miles to get there. That's the perfect type of system versus a grinder system or gravity sewer system to put into those types of developments. So remote areas are really, really good. So take Florida, take Hawaii. If you have a remote community on top of a hill and the treatment plant is lower in elevation, it's a very simple project of just putting these step systems in and pumping and letting gravity take the flow down to the treatment unit.
But you can also pump up.
You can also pump up. So if you have a community like Pu'uko, where they have it's right along the water's edge, the further you can get the water and the treatment unit away from the water so that you can treat it and then have reclaimed water or something finished polishing, let Mother Nature polish that water so that your nitrogen that's entering into the waterways and the reefs is really, really low. This is very good too, because this pump here will pump to about 160 feet of head, which is 50, 60 PSI. So, but then you could pump up and then have another booster pump, or you could have a tank that you're filling and then you pump in off hours to a treatment facility. So there's other designs that you can build into this that helps really with diurnal curves of a wastewater treatment system.
And the difference is you're basically pumping water
Right.
as opposed to the waste in a normal system. And so that makes all the difference.
If you look at the water coming up here, it's clear. It's almost, we have an antiquated old activated sludge plant that I get, my treatment treats about 50% right now. That's why we're building a new plant. So the nitrogen levels coming off my plant is probably 14 to 16 at any given time. You can pull the effluent off of a step system and it's like 18 parts of nitrogen because you got primary treatment occurring in the tank itself. So you're really pumping clear liquid is what you're pumping and then treating that clear liquid.
Yeah, I was actually going to quick make a comment because we've had these conversations about technology before. You didn't use the STEP acronym. People said liquid only sewer system. So I think that's important for us as we move forward as a group to kind of get our semantics aligned very early on.
Yeah, STEP
in
is
the
septic tank
conversation, because
effluent.
you and I as an engineer to see where you're heading with this. So
Yeah,
um,
so we have, we'll take it better, kind of take the blame for that. So I haven't liked using STEP because it starts with the word septic tank and a lot of people get the wrong idea. So purposely, we've over the years tried to push it to liquid only sewer just because it seems like a better description.
Yeah, I gave a presentation on sewer, conversion to sewer, and because it said it had septic tank in it, I was lumped in with all the septic tank companies that were talking about ATUs at a county to the north of us, and I was like, why am I talking about this? We're going to sewer. We're not just replacing it with ATUs, and it is. It by using the term STEP, it is confusing. It is actually a sanitary sewer system or effluent, like you want to use it.
yeah, and you can
That is true.
To the question over there too. I mean, I think the distance is one issue, but obviously you have to go low diameter.
Right.
Solves a lot of it, reduces the cost a lot of it.
Right.
I think the other thing is important to remember, and I don't, for sure is, what is the capacity of the receiving plants?
Oh, yeah.
Even for the liquid.
Yeah.
And even though they had capacity at their wastewater treatment plant,
Another model that we're working on is having a smaller decentralized treatment plant that can just fit on, a concrete pad shipped in a container that's plug and play, that's designed for that area. So you can imagine how much that's going to save in terms of treatment. So if you combine these two, you're not having to do gravity where it always has to have a little bit of gravity and it has to be huge pipes in the middle of the road, very disruptive. You got smaller pipes trenched by the side of the road, much smaller treatment systems. You're talking about a lot of savings there. And that's our biggest concern for communities that just can't afford, and the counties that can't afford to do this.
My other question was for the effluent tanks from the people's septic tanks are on private property.
Yes.
Was there any pushback about from people having that additional tank on their property?
No.
That's owned by I assume this, the county owns.
The city, county, same thing, yeah. So, very few people. The only people that really wanted something different was the ones that were really, really locked, constrained, and they wanted a swimming pool. And then they were like, well, that's gonna take up the room and I can't have my swimming pool. So some of those, we were able to move it around and do stuff, but that was about the only thing. What we did do though, was we require an application and an easement. But we have a very generic easement that just talks about, it's not leaps and bounds, it's not surveyed in whatsoever. It just says that the step equipment, because we buy the step equipment, they pay a fee and we give it to the contractor, they install it. We never lose ownership of it. So they don't have to pay income, they don't have to pay sales tax on it. And then they give us an easement wherever it's installed on the property, it's 5 feet around, and then we have ingress and egress to go in and maintain it. So if they tear that house down and want to put it on the other side of the property, it can. We don't have to change the easement because it's generic in nature. And then it's filed under the deed so that if somebody buys the house, it's going to come up and they're going to say, what's a step system? What do I have on my property? And then they can call us and we'll explain what they have.
It's a prescriptive easement. It's the same way power companies get up to the meter as well.
And so one of the biggest challenges that we have in looking at a technology system like this, that very innovative and could save communities lots of money, is how do we get the governance for communities to organize to install this?
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to give you a quick overview of this responsible management entity, and how we're trying to build capacity so that communities can start to make their own decisions about their water and wastewater, and not be told what to do, and it's going to cost this much and it's more than the value of your home, which we've had in some cases on the Big Island. So I'll hand it over to Jacob.
Hello, I'm Jacob. I'm the new project manager for Vibe, and with Vibe for 6 months, largely brought on because of the CPA grant, which is going towards the development of the Hawaiʻi Responsible Management Entity Collective, and development of responsible management entities in Hawaii as a whole. I feel like most people in this room are probably already very familiar, or at least they're learning because they have already joined the collective, and we welcome anybody else who is in the room to join as well. So what is a responsible management entity? Well, the initiative really is it's a multi-sector partnership. It brings together stakeholders across Hawaii to transform decentralized wastewater management. The goals of this program is threefold. We want to do stakeholder and community training to provide technical assistance to communities in various aspects of wastewater treatment management and operation. We want to provide technical assistance to build. We have a 12-week training course that we're developing. We're in the process of developing the curriculum to be able to bring people from communities that want to be involved in development of a responsible management entity together to learn all the different aspects, all the aspects of technology, all the aspects of potential financing and opportunities for identifying diverse financing stacks for these projects, as well as the operations, maintenance, the ecological considerations of how do we reuse water and other resources that are in the waste, so for water recycling and other opportunities that are there as well. And then providing outreach and education to communities and homeowners to understand those management concerns. So, let's see. There are a number of different models that the EPA recommends for voluntary management within communities. It could be as simple as keeping homeowners aware. So for areas that maybe don't have a lot of environmental sensitivity, or it's very simple, like a septic tank, or maybe advanced or aerobic treatment units. It could just be, hey, homeowner, you haven't pumped your tank in 3 years, right? Or you need to have some awareness around some of those aspects, like Rob was talking about, like what not to flush, what to flush. A lot of having a maintenance contract is another option, where an operator in the area is required to maintain the system. An operator permit where they have to maintain it, or the permit gets revoked every few years. But then at the higher levels, you can have an RME. So a responsible management entity that can either hold one of those operator permits and maintain the system, or if it makes sense to have an ownership model where the responsible management entity owns the system and is responsible for its maintenance for the community. You can see here in context. So here in Hawaii, we have the cesspool conversion prioritization tool that has already prioritized what cesspools we need to replace based on 15 environmental and economic factors. So you can kind of co-opt that for kind of understanding what model we should be using for which community. So priority 1 cesspools, it's more environmentally sensitive. They're closer to the reefs. They're closer to water sources, right? So maybe you have a more engaged model to maintain those. Priority 2, priority 3, if it's priority 3, if it's somewhere in the mountains that has a mile of soil to treat it before it gets to the groundwater, maybe it's just about awareness, right? But if we're in a community that they have small lots, maybe they can't have leach fields, maybe we need to do some sort of decentralized system, then you're going to want to have a responsible management entity that is able to control, maintain, keep the homeowners aware. And that can come in a number of different forms. So part of what we're working on through the Hawaii Responsible Management Entity Collective is really bringing together people to identify what are all the different factors that would go into developing a responsible management entity. So we're structuring it sort of as an online community. We have a broad collective for anyone who just wants to stay engaged with the process as we're developing these responsible management entities. Our goal is to create one in Hawaii and Big Island within the 3-year time period of this grant. So in 2027, we hope to develop one in one of the counties. 2028, we hope to develop one in the other, depending on which communities are more ready. Let's see. So we have the broader collective, then we have 5 subcommittees. We have the ecology subcommittee, cultural and community, technical, operational, and financial. So bringing together experts in their field to come up with the best solutions for what a responsible management entity can do within these communities, and then through their efforts develop a curriculum to bring to community members, regulators, operators, engineers, to go through this 12-week training program. The 12-week training program is supported by a stipend, so everybody who goes through will receive funding for doing so. And yeah, part of that work is just going to be identifying which communities make the most sense to do it in Hawaii as soon as possible and extend from there. And we'd like to thank our key collaborators and funders on that project. It is through the EPA Rural, Small, and Tribal Grant, and our fiscal sponsor is Victor.
Thank you, Jacob. This is very exciting for us because we are just in talking about it to people around the country when we were just in DC. The EPA is excited about it. All our partner groups nationally are excited about it because this has always been the obstacle, right? Creating a governance model. How do you get all these people talking across federal, state, county, and community lines to work together? And so this creates a model where they can do that and really organize it down to like creating, a potential nonprofit organization that maintains it, because maintenance is also a huge issue long term. So we're working on a couple of potential projects around the state. which are very exciting. We'd love your input on, and we'd love your involvement in this. Because again, it's, when I was at Surfrider with Arlene, it's that grassroots kind of involvement with people that really gets them excited. Like they feel like they're part of the process. They're not just being told what to do. And that can go across the state and helps our friends at DOH kind of manage these systems. And Rob, do you have experiences with any RMEs or similar kind of models that you can share?
No, I mean, we maintain our own step systems, everything else now. I know it's a problem. It's a paradigm shift for utilities to go on private property. So how we looked at it was the point of service for us to maintain is the step system tank. The homeowner is responsible to the tank. Similar to utilities, normally it was the property line. So in the case of water, we maintain to the water meter. After the meter, it's considered the homeowner's. In a lateral line, you have usually a connection at the property line and then everything on private property. So it's very difficult for them to break past that point of they're now going onto private property and maintaining something on private property. However, for these types of programs to work, you have to get to that point from a utility, from a county or anything like that. You really need to push that type, because otherwise it then becomes a higher cost to the property owner. Exactly. And then it's who bills it, how do you collect it, trying to find a company to come in and do that. They're going to say, okay, well, I want to charge $5 or $6 a month or whatever the number is. But if they send a bill to the property owner is not going to pay that bill. So they're going to want to collect it from the county or somebody else anyhow, and then transfer back through. So it's a great idea to break it, but if you can bust that hurdle of what you're coming up with and get the counties to start maintaining it, you don't need that. But it's a great opportunity if they're not going to maintain it. You're going to have some entity, because homeowners don't want to maintain, they don't want to operate wastewater systems on their property. They don't want to operate a wastewater. They want to go surfing, they want to go diving, snorkeling, other stuff. They don't want to be stuck maintained. So somebody's got to do it.
Exactly. And as we enter an El Nino with extreme weather events and having gone through the Kona low storms across the state in an age of increasing extreme weather, these are going to be so much more effective, because you're not going to get the infiltration inflow. Whereas if you are anywhere near the coast and priority 1 areas and you're getting those floods, and people had mud and waters in their homes that were full of wastewater recently, and that's going to increase. So we need to have a more resilient system. Yeah, Mike.
Maybe to help you out a little bit, give a little different perspective. Certainly outside Florida, as a manufacturer, we insist on RMEs. There's a saying that, good systems will fail with a bad operator, bad systems somehow survive with a good operator. And so in some states where the utilities aren't as active, we actually then, with the homeowners association, say, okay, that's fine, but you're going to have a certified RME, and we actually take that role. So it's good to see, the state actually, at a state level, that you're actually stepping up and providing something more universal, because it's not as a manufacturer, we don't make money training people. We do that just because we want our infrastructure to last.
Yeah, and you guys with your warranties too, you're going to have some type of a function other than the installer or something to be able to keep up with warranties and everything else of your equipment.
Yeah. Other questions or comments? People we haven't heard from. Bye.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I learned a lot. I wanted to hear a little bit more about the conversions. You talked about 1,000 conversions, and you talked about the community outreach you did and the hesitancy that homeowners initially had. Can you just talk about how the 1,000 conversions rolled out? Was there an initial hesitation, and then maybe some pilot and demonstration projects that showed homeowners that this could work, and then a sudden increase in interest?
So what we did was, since it was a mandatory, Mandatory, it's a lot easier because you're just gonna give them deadlines and follow the law. Non-mandatory, we had to be creative. So what we first did was, because the council gave me $1 million to fund the availability, we went out and we said, as soon as we finished the neighborhood, we sent letters out, had a community meeting, and we told them, look, it's not a mandatory program. However, if you go ahead and connect, we're gonna waive the cost of the line in the street and the tap. We're gonna give you credit for your septic system that equates to the impact fee for treatment. So they were gonna save $3,400 right off the bat by connecting within the first year. If you didn't connect within the first year, that option was gone. So what we found was 10% of the population, they were gonna connect no matter what. They thought it was great for the environment. Anything else didn't matter really what the cost was gonna be. They were signing up, they were gonna do it. 10% on the bottom was, over my dead body, this is government intrusion in my life. So I'm gonna, you're gonna go to my grave and never hook up to your system. And 80% in the middle looked at it from a financial opportunity. Those that had older systems, they knew they were a ticking time bomb, that at one point they were gonna flush the toilet and wasn't gonna go somewhere, and then they were gonna be stuck with it. They went ahead and moved forward with the conversions. The ones that had replaced stuff, they said, well, I'm gonna roll the dice. I think I'll get 10 more years and then I'll connect it in 10 years. So we found on the barrier island where people had more money, we were hitting about a 50% conversion rate on those areas. When we moved to the mainland, a couple things threw a monkey wrench in it. COVID hit, some other stuff associated with it, but we still had some success, not as full. We were hitting around 25–30% conversions. Now we have areas where we're telling them, look, the price, you have inflation going on, the cost is going up. If you wait till the last minute, you're going to be paying a premium. You need to go ahead and connect now because 2028 is the deadline, and we'll turn you over to code enforcement. Now we're seeing it pick up again. So we had a sharp increase, then not much in basin areas. We call them basins. So in neighborhoods that didn't have it, neighborhoods wouldn't do much. And then now they're picking back up, and as we send letters out and keep reminding them, we get activity again. So it's a constant interaction with the community. You can't just sit back. You need to send letters back out reminding them. So for something that you're trying to start here, Stuart, with that type of communications, it's very, very important. We felt that we needed to have trust in the community, and we have had that. We had some environmental activist groups help with financially constrained individuals and work that way. And then they were kind of a champion for us too. Once we started doing these installs, they asked me, hey, can we get a yard sign that says, I connected to STEP? Have you, that kind of stuff. And they were putting them out in their front yard and stuff like that. So it was definitely a good effort by the community. And for it to be successful, you really need the community involved in it. And let them know that we're here as a community to get you to where you need to be. We realize some that can afford it right away, let them go ahead and connect. Ones that need different types of funding and time, we'll work with you and try to get you connected before the deadline. So hopefully that answers it.
Yeah, we have time for 2 more questions.
Oh, very quick. What did it take to pass the mandates politically? And
State did it.
And how long did the state give people before the mandate kicked in?
State kicked it. I think the state put it in either 2023 or 24 and said 6 years. You better connect or go to. It was short. Yeah. Because actually, our county, when I sent them the thing about 2050, is like, well, at least they had 20-something years. We only got 5, type thing. So
what was it that made people want to do that politically?
it was just the health of the lagoon.
Yeah.
So the state officials and everything else in the health of the lagoon.
So-
They did fund about $100 million for the first 4 years towards getting these projects moving, from state funds, from the government. One of the things that you may want to look at that Brevard County did, and it would take state action, and that is a dedicated tax. So there is an optional dedicated tax, like a 1 cent sales tax, that you can impose, and you'd be surprised how much 1 cent sales tax will generate, especially. And then you're pushing the cost on to both, residents are gonna pay, but now you have all the people that are here, tourism and everything else, and businesses that are now paying for that too. That creates a great fund to be able to fund some of this stuff.
And we created a green fee last year, which is remarkable, and percentage of that is going towards projects that we're going to be working on. So that's good, but I think we need a very, very dedicated fund.
A dedicated fund is what you need for this.
Exactly. Yeah, and they did an 1/8 of a penny in Suffolk County, New York, and Long Island, and it generated, but it was a sales tax, and it generated lots of money to help move these things forward.
Yeah, Brevard County was about a population of, well, where the Space Center is. They did a 1/2 cent sales tax, and it's generating $35 to $40 million per year. That then they're using to leverage other grants, so they're doubling their money for the programs.
Exactly. That's a great point.
Catching that. So Cape Cod's another example where they did a bed tax essentially. The bad thing is that there wasn't a lot of accountability for maximizing the use of the money. And also the money actually started to dictate the schedule, not the environment. So something that could be done in 3 years became 20 years because it was actually being paced by the inflow of that bed tax. Yeah.
In Brevard, it was the opposite. They had $30 million come in the first year, and they didn't have any projects. And then the people were saying, where's my money going? So they had to accelerate projects the opposite way.
Do Bianca and then Maya.
Yeah, so I was wondering about the health, the lake and the amenities, of course, if it's, you guys have a sampling, a water quality program to actually prove that the system is effective, and that was the issue.
So what ended up happening was when EPA came down and mandated it as a BMAP and said, okay, you're gonna have to do these reduction limits, the state of Florida at the time was gonna be, they had the bullseye painted up because everybody was gonna be looking at them, not the EPA. So they did their own studies and turned around and said, hey, there's nothing, we don't see where there's an issue. The health of the lagoon shouldn't be devastated by what's going on. So they turned around, they had in the EPA requirements, they had other indicators. So similar to what you have here, your indication is what's happening on the reefs. There it was seagrass. So the health of the lagoon is completely wrapped around how healthy the seagrass is. And now we have seagrass populations that are starting to come back. We have more and more acreage every year that's occurring based on these implementations of both wastewater, stormwater, reclaimed water going to AWT standards. All of these things factor into that.
So in case you didn't know, so BMAP stands for Basin Management Action Plan. They're often they're usually on the basis of a TMDL, which stands for Total Maximum Daily Load. And that is the water sampling, is that they go out and they take water samples and they compare that to what the water body should be capable of handling. And so then anything that's in excess or close to an excess, that's when they drive a BMAP program to make sure that they don't exceed or if they actually reduce that impact.
So they looked at all of the cities, all of the counties, their impact of nitrogen and phosphorus, and then they said to each city and county, this is what you're allowed, this is what you're producing, you have to put projects in place to lower it down. Then every year they go back out and say, what have you done, what's your next project? And we start putting projects in place to lower the amount of nitrogen and phosphorus goes to the lagoon.
Okay, we have to be out of here by 5 o'clock. So we want some time for networking, sometimes for grazing of the food, because we want you to eat and have a drink. Maya, you want to finish this out?
Can you tell us a little bit about whether or not the locations of the people who needed to connect to sewer was known in Florida? There was a state mandate for everyone to connect by 2030. Was the location known of who needed to convert and update? No.
So probably starting in 2013, they went through the counties and put the responsibility on the counties to come up with who was on septic, who wasn't, who was on sewer, because nobody knew, you know, and so they turned around at that point and worked with the Department of Health and looked at how many homes were built that had wells, and they knew they were on septic, because most people aren't on sewer if they're hooked, unless they're hooked to a water system. And then they had, the ones that we know, we don't know, and we have no idea, type thing. We think it's this, and they came up with at least maps. And the problem was Indian River County, 55% of the residents were on septic system, 45% were on sewer. So that was, and it wasn't too much difference up and down on those counties. They were all about 50-50. And that's what really hit home, and they started looking at it and saying, we got to do something.
Thank you.
And to end, I want to thank, Rob is kind of a definition of a civil servant and a dedicated one, taking family vacation time to come here and be with us. We really do appreciate the information. It's just it's so practical and real, because it's just, this is what we were facing. These were the options. These were what we looked in. These are the prices. I also want to acknowledge our friends from DOH who are here. Caroline and Kevin, thank you for taking the time to learning about these things, and to each of you for coming out and spending the time to learn about this, because we have this mandate, and it's big and it's heavy and it's expensive and it's a burden, but it's also an opportunity. This is an opportunity for growth, for their studies that are coming out of UH showing people's houses, the value of replacing your cesspool, the value of the house going up is much more than the cost of the cesspool. And that can be translated out into community level. The state is dependent on tourism. The more we clean up our water and protect, it's not only good for locals, it's good for business and good for all of us, especially those who love being in the ocean, like many of us do. But let's give a big round of applause to Rob. We hope you guys get involved with the RME. You can talk to Jacob or myself or Jessica in the back.
Marco on the screen.
Yes, please use that to do this. This is a really exciting thing, and we need people's support across all sectors, from the government sector to private sector. But please eat some more food, and thanks again for coming out. Aloha.
See how they were installing in like on the side of our island.
I suggested.
The water level.
He works with our maintenance.
It's very.
From where? Oh, okay.
So when you
Oh, they
say
originally-
material.